Hello class, this is Dr. Medi. I'd like to welcome you to week 6. We've got our last 4 chapters that we're reading in the book, and these are 13 through 16. One of the things we're going to be looking at is the differences between groups and teams, the stages of group and team development, and how to build effective teams. It's one thing to have everybody on one team, but how do you make them effective to get the job done and in the way they need to do it? And of course, in doing that, we get to a wonderful topic of conflict, because more often than not, there is conflict in teams. And this is why it's so important to make sure that we do what we can to minimize conflict, and if we do have it, to resolve it as quickly as possible. And that's chapter 13. As we get into 14, we start looking at power, the influence and the nature of leadership, the role of power. We talked about leadership in an earlier chapter, but now we're looking at how leadership affects power in the organization. How do you become a manager and then develop into a leader? The 5 sources of power. We're going to look at the trait approaches. Are people leaders because they have certain traits, or are they leaders because they can be trained to be so? And this is where we get into the are leaders born or made. The situational approach says that leadership varies with the situation. So in other words, there's times when you should be a different type of leader. If you're trying to enforce discipline or get a job done, you're not worried about how the employee feels. You have to make a decision. This is what we have to do. Okay? And just as an analogy, if there's a fire in the building, you don't ask if everybody's okay with taking the stairs instead of the elevator, right? I know it's a simplistic analogy, but that's the kind of thing that as a manager, you do these things. But as a leader, we got to go. We got to do this. We got to be, So sometimes you have to portray a different style of leadership when you're trying to be effective in the organization and you're trying to get employees to do what they need to do. We're going to look at transformational leadership. We're going to look at the leader-member exchange theory. And this has always been interesting to me because it happens more often than managers like to admit it, where people have 2 groups of employees on their teams. The ones they like and the ones they don't like, let's be honest. There are some people that managers are privy, they make them privy to decisions they're doing, and there are other people that are in the dark and have no idea. And this has been going on for a long time. Managers don't like to admit it, leaders don't like to admit it, but it does happen. So we're going to talk about that. As we round up to chapter 15, we get into the wonderful topic of communication. What is communication? What is the process? How does it work? How do you know that you're selecting the right medium for effective communication? There are barriers to communication that we're going to look at. We're also going to look at social media. This is a big thing. It's changing the way people are receptive or not to management, how we communicate with each other. There is a downside, believe it or not. I'm a firm believer that for the most part, because everybody's so used to Facebook and Twitter and whatever else is out there, I have no clue. I'm on Facebook. That's my limit, okay? We've forgotten how to write. We have forgotten how to spell. We have forgotten how to articulate in complete sentences. There's a lot of things that are happening because of the influx of ways to communicate through social media that really has eliminated a formal style of communicating and writing and articulating. And those things are important. We're also going to look at how to improve communication effectiveness. How can we be better listeners? Boy, this is something that we really don't hear too much about. Being an effective speaker also. Being an effective writer, as I said, social media has really gotten us used to writing in single letters. So if, for example, you want to write the word before, it would be B-E-F-O-R-E. Well, on social media, it's the letter B and the number 4. So before I go to the store, we're really taking ourselves backwards as far as how we're communicating, how we're writing and how we're articulating to other people. So that's chapter 15. And when we get to 16, now we're looking at quality management. We've talked about the organization and all the different facets of it. Quality management gets into controlling processes to make sure that the organization remains effective. So how do you make sure as a manager that you're monitoring performance appropriately? What is too much and what is too little? What areas and levels of control do you need to initiate? There's 6 areas of control the chapter talks about. The balanced scorecard is important as well. Some financial tools. You may have to look at financial statements because the company may be losing money. So when we look at controls, it's not just about people. It's what is the company doing? What is the organization doing that may be hurting its financial performance? And then we get into total quality management, which is really, if you look at people like Deming, and we're going to look at him, we're going to look at some core principles of TQM. You'll hear the acronym TQM, and then you'll know what that means. How do you apply that to services? And then we're going to look at some different techniques and standards for total quality management. How to effectively manage control. There are keys to successful control systems, and there are barriers to controlling the success in the organization. We're also going to look at productivity. Why is it so important to increase it all the time? How do we increase the productivity of individuals? And how do we make sure that what they're doing is in line with the needs of the organization? So that rounds us out for week 6. There's 4 chapters, 13 through 16. As always, like I said, read the chapters, listen to the lectures, do the match games, do the discussion boards, and keep working on that page of notes for the final, which is next week. This is Dr. Medi signing off. Talk to you later. Let me know if you have any questions.